They mocked me publicly for my poverty. My shocking comeback left them speechless. His voice, amplified by the cavernous hall, cut through the murmurs like a finely honed blade. "And here we have the curious case of Lysander," Sterling Thorne announced, a condescending smirk plastered across his perfectly coiffed face. "A man, I am told, who believes he holds the key to the future of energy, yet struggles to afford a suit that isn't a decade out of style." Laughter, polite yet stinging, rippled through the elite crowd gathered for the annual Thorne Innovations Gala. My threadbare jacket suddenly felt heavier, the worn cuffs a stark contrast to the shimmering silk and tailored wool surrounding me. My demo unit, a compact marvel of my own design, sat silently on its pedestal, an unassuming beacon amidst the opulent displays. Sterling gestured towards me with an open hand, a theatrical flourish. He speaks of sustainable power, of revolutionary materials, yet his most significant find, I hear, was scavenged from a landfill. One man's trash, another man's, well, still trash, it seems. More laughter, louder this time. The air in the grand ballroom, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and triumph, felt suddenly thin to others, but not to me. My gaze remained steady, fixed on Sterling. Every word he uttered, every dismissive wave of his hand, landed not as an insult, but as a confirmation. He had no idea, absolutely no inkling, that the very material he so casually mocked was about to become the linchpin of his very undoing. He was building his castle on sand, unaware that my trash held the exact, critical element his multi-billion-dollar empire desperately needed, and was even now failing without. A quiet certainty settled deep within me, a calm born not of arrogance, but of absolute, irrefutable knowledge. This moment, this public humiliation, would not be my defeat, but the prelude to his most shocking revelation. My journey to that brightly lit, shame-filled stage had been a long and arduous one, paved with countless sacrifices and an unyielding belief in a future I felt destined to help build. From a young age, the concept of energy had fascinated me, not merely its consumption, but its essence, its potential to be harnessed without depleting the very planet that sustained us. I spent my formative years devouring every book, every scientific paper on sustainable technologies, often sketching designs on the backs of discarded receipts, my mind constantly buzzing with concepts that felt just out of reach. My family was modest, hardworking, but resources were scarce. Formal education was a luxury I couldn't afford beyond community college, so I built my own laboratory in a cramped corner of my tiny apartment, fueled by stubborn optimism and ramen noodles. I learned through relentless experimentation, through failures that piled up like discarded junk, each one a lesson. The initial prototypes of my energy converter were crude, inefficient, frustratingly temperamental. Funding, of course, was an elusive dream. Investors saw my humble background, my lack of prestigious degrees, and politely, or sometimes not so politely, closed their doors. They wanted polish, pedigree, a track record of established success. I offered none of that, only raw potential and an unblemished vision. Sterling Thorne, on the other hand, had been born into the gilded cage of privilege. His father, a shrewd but ultimately conventional tech magnate, had amassed a fortune, leaving Sterling to inherit a sprawling empire known as Thorne Innovations. While I toiled away in obscurity, Sterling was busy cultivating an image of a disruptive visionary, leveraging his inherited wealth and influence to acquire promising startups and parade them as his own genius. Our paths had crossed once, briefly, a few years prior, at a lesser-known tech demo event. I had approached him, nervous but hopeful, with an early sketch of my energy concept. He had dismissed me with a wave of his hand, his eyes scanning the room, already bored. Interesting, but where's the scalability? Where's the immediate ROI, Lysander? Fantasies are cheap. Real innovation demands capital, and capital demands practicality, not pipe dreams. His words had stung then, but they had also ignited a quiet resolve within me. I would prove him wrong. This secret weapon he had so flippantly referenced, this scavenged trash, was not merely a material. It was a revelation that had altered the course of my entire project. My financial constraints had forced me to be resourceful, to look where others didn't. I frequented industrial junkyards, scouring for discarded components, for anything that might be repurposed. It was during one particularly bleak, rainy afternoon, sifting through a mountain of corroded circuitry and twisted metal, that I stumbled upon it. It didn't look like much, a dull, strangely textured material, unlike any metal or composite I had ever seen. It felt cool to the touch, almost inert, yet something about its unique crystalline structure, visible only under my makeshift microscope, piqued my curiosity. My initial tests yielded nothing remarkable. It was non-conductive, surprisingly resilient, seemingly useless. But then, almost by accident, while attempting to ionize a different material in its vicinity, I noticed a peculiar phenomenon. The discarded trash subtly altered the energy field, stabilizing it, making it incredibly efficient, almost perfectly channeling the kinetic energy into a pure, usable form. It was a property that defied conventional physics, a passive energy catalyst that seemed to simply work. It wasn't about generating power, but about optimizing its flow, preventing loss, and radically improving conversion rates. It was the missing link I'd been searching for, the key to unlocking the true potential of my sustainable energy device. I spent months agonizing over its composition, its properties, its origin. I couldn't replicate it, couldn't synthesize it. It was unique, likely a byproduct of some obscure industrial process, discarded because its true properties were overlooked or misunderstood. Its very existence was a testament to the world's habit of discarding what it didn't immediately comprehend. My poverty, my forced reliance on overlooked resources, had led me to a discovery that wealth and conventional research paths would never have unearthed. This material, which I dubbed Aetherite, for its ethereal energy-channeling capabilities, became the core of my invention, the reason my seemingly simple device could achieve unparalleled efficiency. I knew then, with a quiet certainty, that Aetherite was not just vital for my project, but for any large-scale energy system struggling with efficiency and dissipation. And that's when the whispers started, rumors of Thorne Innovations' flagship Nexus project, a multi-billion-dollar venture aiming to power entire smart cities, secretly teetering on the brink of catastrophic failure due to an insurmountable power source issue, a problem of energy stability and loss on an epic scale. Suddenly, my trash wasn't just a discovery. It was the one thing that could save or condemn Sterling Thorne. The weeks leading up to the gala were a blur of meticulous preparation. I refined my demonstration unit, ensuring it was robust, compact, and capable of showcasing the Aetherite's full potential in a dramatic, undeniable fashion. My goal wasn't just to secure funding. It was to make an incontrovertible statement. I knew Sterling would be there, and I fully anticipated his mockery. It was part of my plan, in a strange way. His arrogance was predictable, a predictable reaction to what he perceived as weakness. This predictability was my greatest asset. I arrived at the gala quietly, blending into the opulent backdrop as much as a man in a borrowed, slightly ill-fitting suit could. My demo station was tucked away in a corner, far from the spotlight, which suited me perfectly. I watched Sterling work the room, his charismatic smile a practiced mask, his voice booming with feigned humility as he introduced one of Thorne Innovations' latest, less impressive, acquisitions. I overheard snippets of conversation from the periphery, hushed anxieties about the Nexus project's delays, the enormous financial pressures. They spoke of a stability paradox, a power bleed problem that no amount of engineering seemed able to solve. My lips quirked almost imperceptibly. They were describing the precise problem Aetherite was designed to resolve. My own presentation slot was late, deliberately so. I wanted to be the last, the one who lingered in memory. As the evening progressed, Sterling's performance grew bolder. He moved from group to group, subtly belittling competitors, subtly inflating his own importance. When he finally approached my station, it was as if he were bestowing a great favor upon me. His eyes swept over my humble display, then lingered on my attire, a flicker of contempt in his gaze. "Lysander," he drawled, his voice carrying just enough to attract attention from nearby clusters of guests, "still playing with your sustainable dreams, are we?" He picked up a small, encased piece of Aetherite on my display, turning it over in his hand with a look of feigned intellectual curiosity. "This is it, then? Your miracle material? Looks rather pedestrian, wouldn't you say, ladies and gentlemen?" He let out a soft chuckle, but his eyes were sharp, evaluating the reactions of the onlookers. He was testing the waters, preparing for the public takedown. I maintained my calm, a quiet smile on my face. Its appearance belies its properties, Mr. Thorne. True value often resides where one least expects it. His smile tightened, his pretense of politeness dissolving. Oh, I'm sure it does. But let's be honest, Lysander, this is the Thorne Innovations Gala. We deal in proven, scalable solutions, not interesting curiosities found in, shall we say, less conventional places. Our Nexus project, for instance, aims to power entire megacities with unprecedented efficiency. It requires cutting-edge, proprietary solutions, not salvaged scraps. He placed the Aetherite back down with a dismissive clink. His words, delivered with a casual air of authority, were designed to brand me as an amateur, an irrelevant dreamer. He was playing his part perfectly. Little did he know, he was merely setting the stage for mine. My heart rate remained steady. I had calculated this moment, predicted his every move. The greater his public dismissal, the more profound the shock of the reveal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about demonstrating irrefutable truth. The climax arrived, not with a bang, but with Sterling Thorne's carefully orchestrated public humiliation. He had called for everyone's attention, drawing them towards my unassuming display, using me as a foil for his own perceived brilliance. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, his voice boomed, amplified by the hall's excellent acoustics, we stand at the precipice of a new era. An era of unprecedented power, stability, and control. Our Nexus project, as many of you know, is the culmination of years of tireless research and billions of dollars of investment. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle, then turned his gaze deliberately to me, a predatory glint in his eyes. And sometimes, he continued, a patronizing smile spreading across his face, we encounter, well, let's call them enthusiasts. Individuals with spirited ideas, who, perhaps, lack the resources, the infrastructure, or indeed, the fundamental understanding of just how complex true innovation can be. He gestured to my threadbare attire, eliciting nervous titters from the crowd. Mr. Lysander here, for example, presents what he calls a groundbreaking sustainable energy device. He even purports to have discovered a unique material, a secret ingredient found, quite literally, in a junkyard, that he claims will revolutionize energy conversion. Sterling picked up the Aetherite, holding it aloft as if it were a comical trinket. He believes this. Rock, he scoffed, turning it over in his fingers with disdain, is the answer to the world's energy challenges. The fanciful dreams of a pauper, wouldn't you agree? The laughter escalated this time, a wave of discomforting amusement washing over the crowd. A few sympathetic glances came my way, but most were either too engrossed in the spectacle or too eager to align themselves with Sterling Thorne's evident power. I simply met his gaze, my expression unreadable. My calm demeanor seemed to frustrate him, for his smile tightened, hinting at a flash of pique. Tell us, Lysander, he pressed, his voice dripping with condescension, how does your junkyard marvel achieve these purported miracles? Or is it simply wishful thinking from a man who clearly needs a new tailor? The room fell silent, everyone waiting for my response, expecting a stammering defense, an outburst of frustration. Mr. Thorne, I began, my voice steady, carrying without needing an amplifier, a quiet authority in its tone. True innovation often begins in the overlooked and the discarded. And the most profound truths are often the simplest, once understood. I walked calmly to my demonstration unit, a compact, sleek device that looked deceptively simple. You spoke of the Nexus project? A marvel of engineering, indeed. Yet, I've heard whispers of certain, persistent challenges. Problems with energy stability, with maintaining efficiency at scale. Power bleed that threatens its very viability. A ripple went through the crowd. Sterling's confident facade faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise and annoyance in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to mention his project's Achilles heel, let alone in such an open forum. That problem, Mr. Thorne, I continued, my voice gaining a subtle edge of conviction, is precisely what Aetherite resolves. It's not just about producing energy, it's about channeling it perfectly, eliminating loss, stabilizing even the most volatile currents. I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. You see, all your cutting-edge, billions of dollars technology is still subject to the fundamental laws of physics. Entropy, energy degradation, system instability, these are universal problems. My material, however humble its origin, offers a universal solution. I reached into my demonstration unit, revealing a concealed compartment where the Aetherite core rested, glowing faintly with a contained, emerald luminescence. This small piece of trash is a passive energy conduit. It doesn't generate power, it optimizes it. It creates a field that allows for near-perfect energy transfer and stabilization. Imagine, if you will, the difference between a leaky pipe and one that loses not a single drop. I then pressed a button on my unit. A holographic display shimmered to life above it, showing complex energy waveforms. This is a representation of a standard, large-scale energy transfer. Notice the instability, the inevitable power loss, the fluctuating peaks and troughs. The audience leaned in, murmuring, captivated by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Sterling looked increasingly uncomfortable, his forced smile now completely gone, replaced by a tight, rigid expression. "Now," I announced, my voice dropping slightly, drawing them in further, Thorne Innovations' Nexus project faces a critical juncture. Its core power source, while powerful, generates immense instability, leading to system degradation and potential cascading failures at scale. I've taken the liberty of simulating a simplified portion of your Nexus power grid, a representation of its current state. Another holographic projection materialized, showing a tumultuous, chaotic energy flow mirroring the problematic data that had been secretly plaguing Thorne Innovations. Gasps rippled through the audience. Many of them, high-level investors and engineers, recognized the specific energy signature, the telltale signs of the Nexus project's publicly unspoken crisis. "In this," I said, my hand resting on my demo unit, "is Aetherite at work." With a deliberate movement, I activated the Aetherite within my device, sending a subtle, almost imperceptible energetic pulse, connecting it to the simulated Nexus grid. The change was instantaneous and breathtaking. On the holographic display, the chaotic, wild energy flows stabilized, smoothed into perfectly symmetrical waves, losing virtually no energy. The red error indicators that had flashed on the simulated Nexus grid vanished, replaced by solid green. The previously tumultuous, failing system now pulsed with an elegant, unwavering efficiency. It was as if a raging storm had suddenly become a serene, flowing river. A stunned silence fell over the ballroom. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. They simply stared, their eyes wide with disbelief, then dawning comprehension. The realization hit them like a physical force. This unassuming, pauper's invention, powered by junk, had just effortlessly solved the multi-billion-dollar problem that was threatening to cripple Thorne Innovations. Sterling Thorne stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the holographic display, his face a mask of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white where he clutched the podium. The color drained from his face, leaving him ashen. He opened his mouth, then closed it, no sound emerging. The man who thrived on public validation was, for the first time in his life, utterly speechless. His public mockery had just been turned into his most profound, devastating public humiliation. My shocking comeback had left them all, especially him, absolutely speechless. The silence that followed my demonstration was heavier than any applause, more impactful than any ovation. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting, of assumption shattering. Then, a murmuring began, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, quickly growing into a buzzing crescendo. Heads whipped between the now perfectly stable holographic projection and Sterling Thorne, who still stood paralyzed, a deer caught in high beams. His eyes, initially wide with shock, narrowed with something akin to desperation as he slowly, agonizingly, grasped the full implications. The whispers around me turned into excited exclamations. "Is that the Nexus problem?" Someone breathed, their voice laced with awe. "He just solved it. Right here, right now." Another voice, louder, more insistent. "Thorne Innovations has been bleeding capital for months on this stability paradox." Sterling finally moved, his eyes darting wildly around the room, searching for an escape, for a way to regain control. His carefully constructed image of an infallible mogul was crumbling before everyone's eyes. He tried to speak, but only a strangled, guttural sound escaped his throat. The man who had mocked my poverty and dismissed my ideas as fanciful dreams was now witnessing his multi-billion-dollar dream project being salvaged and simultaneously condemned by the very trash he had so gleefully ridiculed. Within minutes, the gala, which had been a celebration of Thorne Innovations' dominance, transformed into a frenzied marketplace with me at its center. Investors, previously aloof or dismissive, now swarmed my modest display, their business cards thrust into my hands, their voices overlapping in a desperate attempt to gain my attention. "Mr. Lysander, my firm would be honored to discuss exclusive partnerships. We've been following the Nexus project's difficulties closely. Your material, is revolutionary. The shift was immediate, visceral, and utterly complete. Sterling Thorne, meanwhile, found himself isolated. The very people who had laughed with him, toasted him, and sought his favor, now respectfully, almost imperceptibly, distanced themselves. His inner circle, the board members of Thorne Innovations, looked at him with a mixture of anger and betrayal. He had concealed the true extent of the Nexus problem, hoping to find a solution internally to protect his ego and the company's stock price. Now, publicly, undeniably, his secret failure had been exposed not by a competitor, but by the very man he'd attempted to crush. I watched him as he finally stumbled off the stage, his shoulders slumped, his once impeccable suit now seeming to hang loosely on his frame. The arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a look of profound defeat. He didn't even glance my way. He couldn't. The weight of his own hubris, magnified by the glare of public revelation, was too much to bear. News travels fast in the tech world, especially news accompanied by such dramatic, undeniable proof. By the next morning, my name was on every major tech blog and news site. The story of the pauper inventor who saved a multi-billion-dollar project with junkyard trash went viral. Thorne Innovations stock plummeted, with investors demanding answers about the concealed Nexus failures. Sterling Thorne, once the darling of the industry, found himself under intense scrutiny, facing accusations of negligence and mismanagement. The irony was not lost on anyone. His own arrogance had forced me to reveal the solution in the most public, humiliating way possible, rather than allowing for a discreet, mutually beneficial collaboration earlier. Months passed, and the dust settled, though the reverberations of that night continued to reshape the landscape. Thorne Innovations, unable to quickly replicate or find an alternative to Aetherite, was forced into a desperate corner. Without my material, their Nexus project was dead in the water, a gargantuan white elephant draining their resources. Faced with the stark choice between total collapse and swallowing his pride, Sterling Thorne had no other option. His company approached me, not with demands, but with an offer of partnership, a deal that recognized the irreplaceable value of my Aetherite and my expertise. I negotiated firmly, not out of malice, but out of a clear understanding of the true worth of my invention and the principles I stood for. My terms included substantial investment in sustainable energy research, ethical sourcing of materials, and a significant portion of the new venture to be held by me, granting me creative control over the Aetherite applications. It was a deal that transformed me from a struggling inventor into the CEO of Aetherite Solutions, a company dedicated to clean, efficient energy born from the very trash Sterling had scorned. Sterling Thorne, humbled and stripped of much of his former influence, remained on the board of what was now effectively a joint venture, a necessary but diminished figurehead. He never publicly apologized, but I sensed a grudging respect in our infrequent, professional interactions. He had learned, the hard way, that true innovation wasn't about inherited wealth or flashy presentations, but about vision, perseverance, and the often unseen value in the overlooked. My life transformed profoundly, but my core values remained unwavering. I established research grants for young, unconventional inventors, ensuring that financial constraints would not stifle their genius. Aetherite Solutions flourished, not just developing applications for large-scale grids, but also creating accessible, affordable energy solutions for underserved communities around the world. We proved that sustainable energy wasn't just an ideal, but a practical, profitable reality when approached with wisdom and ingenuity. Looking back, that night at the gala wasn't about revenge, it was about validation. Not for my ego, but for the fundamental truth that value is often hidden in plain sight, dismissed by those too blinded by superficial appearances or conventional wisdom. It taught me that perseverance in the face of judgment and an unwavering belief in your own unique vision can overcome even the most formidable arrogance. True wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the impact you make, the problems you solve, and the quiet dignity you maintain when others attempt to diminish you. Never let someone else's narrow perception of your worth dictate your reality. The greatest comebacks are often silent, meticulously planned, and ultimately undeniable.